Hey everyone, welcome to another live recording of Trump's Trials and Tribulations, New York Trial Dispatch Edition. Today is May 13th, 2024, the day Michael Cohen finally took the stand. I'm Roger Parloff, a senior editor at Lawfare, and I'm here with courts correspondent and legal fellow Anna Bauer, managing editor Tyler McBrien, and editor-in-chief Benjamin Wittes. Today was the main event. Lots to cover. So, Tyler, you were in the courtroom in the early morning session. Quickly set the scene and then take us through to today's first witness, Michael Cohen.
Sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, it was, the dramatic sort of centerpiece of the trial. I think this was well illustrated by the difficulty with acquiring line sitters and the time that they had to get in so early last night. This was, it was a packed house. Trump's entourage was the biggest I have seen it being. There were new faces. Tommy Tuberville was there. Another senator was there, J.D. Vance. There was another congresswoman as well. And so it was so packed that I remarked that Boris Epstein, who usually can kind of lounge over an empty pew, was in between two members of Trump's entourage. So it was a packed house, and there were I think no preliminary matters unless Anna and Ben want to correct me there. And almost immediately, the prosecution stood. Susan Hoffinger stood and said, "The people call Michael Cohen."
Well, there was one thing I wanted to ask about, which was there was a ruling relating to Weiselberg and his separation agreement. Can you discuss that, or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Anna, go for it.
Yeah.
On Friday after court about whether or not the prosecution would be able to admit the separation agreement between Alan Weiselberg and the Trump organization. That separation agreement is the one that basically said that Alan Weiselberg is still owed $750,000 as a part of that agreement. And it also prohibited him from voluntarily meeting with prosecutors or law enforcement, anyone with, I believe the term was, claims against the Trump organization or some of its related entities. The prosecution wanted to introduce that as a way of showing the jury why Alan Weiselberg would not be appearing to testify at this trial. However, there was some debate about it. The defense counsel said, no, the real reason he's not here is because he's in Rikers serving a sentence for perjury related to a Trump case. So there was a lot of back and forth about this. And Justice Merchan started out the day by saying that after mulling it over the weekend, he has decided that he's not going to allow the separation agreement into evidence. He said that it's not probative of the charges in this case. And did I miss anything in terms of?
No, I mean, he was very firm. It's a very pro-defense ruling. It puts the burden entirely on the prosecution in terms of figuring out how to explain to the jury why Alan Weiselberg is. And it does not propose a solution to that problem. It simply says you can't introduce the agreement that says the reason that he's not there is that you're paying him $1 million, literally, not to cooperate with law enforcement. And so I think it's got to have been a very frustrating 5 minutes for the prosecution. And to all the Trumpists out there who think this is a super biased judge with a nasty daughter, he did you a solid today. And without a lot of explanation, and frankly, I'm not sure he's right on this point.
And so we don't have any idea if he's going to give any sort of missing witness instruction or anything, because this is, I mean, jurors are going to wonder where is Weiselberg.
In fact, there's a bit of a conflict between him yesterday, Friday, and him today. Friday, he said, if you want me to give some kind of special instruction, or you want to introduce this this agreement, you got to try to produce him first. So I assumed, although I don't know, that the prosecution came this morning expecting to produce him in some way. And instead, they got this, don't bother, I'm not going to let you introduce this no matter what you do. And so I actually think they're probably a little bit frustrated today. I mean, they went on with the day, and district judge's word is law in his courtroom, so you don't vent frustration at him. But I bet there was a little bit of irritation in the prosecution about this.
But I will say that I don't think that this precludes either side from requesting a missing witness instruction.
Correct.
This is a question of admission of evidence versus there will be a charging conference later on, which is where the parties go through and argue about what instructions the jury should receive. There is something called a missing witness instruction, and either side can ask for that. Although Emil Bovey mentioned at the arguments on Friday that it seems to be the case that they think that because the witness is equally unavailable, in his words, to both parties, that there might be some kind of modified instruction that relates to, what it means when both parties can't have a witness for whatever reason, and jury not making any kind of adverse inferences in either direction based on that. So we'll see. Okay.
And Tyler, let's get back to Michael Cohen. And first, let me just ask you a logistical thing, and I hope you haven't been answering this previously, but so when Cohen comes in, does he have to walk past Trump to get to the witness stand? And do they make eye contact? And once he's there, do they make eye contact? And tell us about that.
Sure. So if you're looking at Justice Merchan, you're looking at the bench. From where I'm seated, there's a side door on the left. That's where the prosecution comes and goes, from which the prosecution comes and goes, as well as the witness. So when the people call Michael Cohen, the court officer will go through the door, and then you'll see the door kind of open, just ajar a bit, and a court's officer will pop in and say, "Witness entering." Then they'll follow Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen will follow the court's officer directly in front of the defense table. The defense table's on the left, so he walks directly in front of Trump. I don't believe they made eye contact. I think Cohen kept his eyes kind of straight. First, he was darting around quite a bit, I would say, with his eyesight, especially through the gallery to the jury. And then he walks straight up to the stand, which is just to the right. It's to Merchan's left, directly in front of the prosecution table. And then, to the left of Cohen is then the jury box as well. So Cohen sat down. I would say he was fairly, calm and neutral. He had a water bottle in hand. He puts it down. We start just with a fairly, I'd say, basic retelling of some of Cohen's early life. We get very quickly to how he became engaged with the Trump organization, which started, I'll give the broad strokes. Cohen had invested in real estate along with, I believe, some of his family in a Trump building. And then through that started doing some work with Trump, at first unpaid. Then at a certain point, he brought Trump a bill for $100,000 for more significant work he had done at Trump's behest, at which point Trump didn't pay the bill, but instead offered Cohen a job. And that very day, Cohen said that he didn't go back to the firm. Rather, Trump organization staff went to his firm, packed up his things, and brought them to Trump Tower. And so that began in 2007, I believe. And that was where Cohen worked for the next years until January 2017.
And Anna, do you want to take it from there? What happened next in terms of his testimony?
Right. So I think that we basically went through a lot of the backstory with the hush money payments that were made previous to the Stormy Daniels payment. Of course, if people remember at the very beginning of the case, we got a lot of information about the payments to Karen McDougal through AMI. That's David Pecker of the National Enquirer and Dylan Howard. We also heard about another payment that AMI made to Dino Sajudin, who is the former doorman at Trump Tower, who claimed that Trump had an illegitimate child. And that was all kind of being set up to not only show this pattern of the hush money scheme, but it was also being set up to argue one of the prosecution's theories for the step-up crime, as it's called, which is this election law that makes it a crime to conspire to promote or prevent a candidate from, being elected to office through unlawful means. So we were kind of getting this conspiracy story about these hush money payments that could be, illegal in-kind contributions to the campaign. We will see exactly how the prosecution argues that. But with Cohen, we similarly kind of started out by hearing a lot about what he knew about the Dino payment, and then also the Karen McDougal payment. And a big part of the theme and lines of questioning there had to do with exactly how it was that Cohen and Trump interacted with each other in terms of their working relationship. The prosecution over and over and over again elicited testimony in which Cohen said, yes, I did directly report to Trump about all of these things, that I would be talking to David Pecker about what was going on with this with the Dino story. Anytime he was talking to people about the McDougal story, he would be constantly updating Trump. And then, of course, we also, again, got that recording that has been played for the jury before, but it was played again with Cohen, who's the person who recorded this conversation that occurred with Trump in Trump Tower around the Karen McDougal payment, in which Trump is saying, how they're talking about potentially reimbursing AMI for that $150 payment. And Trump is saying things to the effect of, how much do we got to pay? $150. So it's implying that he had some knowledge of the payment and had some understanding that there was an expectation of reimbursing AMI. So the prosecution was kind of establishing this pattern of Cohen's reporting practices with Trump, their working relationship, and then also these previous hush money payments. And then that brought us into the Stormy Daniels payment that I will hand over to Ben to discuss.
Yeah, I think look, Cohen, at the end of the day, he testified all day today, and he's not done on direct. But at the end of the day, there's really two things that he testified to that are critical to the prosecution. The first is that he directed Cohen to make the Stormy Daniels payment. And he makes that claim in a number of ways. The first is that Trump just says to him bluntly, deal with it, which he interprets to mean go arrange to make a payment. He goes and does that, but then Trump really wants to hold off until after the election, because then he can stiff them and not pay. And so he's kind of holding them off at Trump's behest. And then they perceive, because Stormy Daniels makes clear that she's going to talk, and so they have to do it all of a sudden. And so he goes, and this is the part where I think, if you believe a word of what Michael Cohen says, Trump has got a problem. He basically goes and lightning fast does a whole lot of banking in order to get himself in a position to do it, and then calls Trump at 8:30 in the morning or 8:34 in the morning on the morning of, I believe, the 16th of October or 17th of October, 2016, and basically says he laid out for him exactly what he was going to do, and Trump says go ahead. And so I think, to the extent that that Cohen is he really does justify, truthfully or not, that he is acting at Trump's direction in this context. The second thing he does is he describes, and this is more important from the point of view of the elements of the offense, he describes Trump's causing him and Alan Weiselberg to falsify the records. And the mechanism of this and you guys correct me if I'm misremembering the details of this, is that Cohen goes and has a temper tantrum to Alan Weiselberg because he hasn't gotten as big a bonus as he expected, and he's very upset about this. By the way, never don't give your chief lieutenants in crime the bonus they're expecting, because that's a dangerous thing. Always overpay on the bonus. So he goes to Alan Weiselberg and gets and has a temper tantrum about his bonus and the fact that he has not been reimbursed for his outlay on behalf of the president, or the would-be the now president-elect. And he, in response, gets called into Trump's office and Trump says to him, look, I know you're upset. We're going to take care of it. We're going to reimburse you. And he brings in Weiselberg and then arranges this whole reimbursement scheme. And so I think the prosecution's going to argue, with some justice, by the way, that this is the causing of the false records to be made. And the whole thing will turn on whether the jury believes Michael Cohen, which brings me to my last point, which is that we are right in the middle of this testimony. Cohen has held up very well under direct examination. I think he's been a pretty credible witness. I don't want to say anything about what this is going to look like by the day tomorrow, because remember, I warned you guys about, the possibility that Stormy Daniels' testimony could be a disaster on cross, which it was not. Michael Cohen's testimony could really be a disaster on cross. And I think we should all be careful about drawing conclusions now based on the direct exam without knowing what Todd Blanche is going to do to him tomorrow.
One
Just
thing. Go ahead.
I just wanted to build out a few things on what Anna and Ben were saying. I think it's really important. Straight out of the gate, Susan Hoffinger was establishing that everything that Cohen did, he did at the sole, benefit of discretion of Trump. So much so that when Trump became president-elect that very day, Cohen's role at the Trump organization effectively dissolved. His whole, reason of being ceased to be. So he no longer had a purpose essentially at the Trump organization. So that's the first point. The second point, there was in terms of Trump directing Cohen to make these payments to Stormy Daniels, they've seemed to sort of be establishing that there would be no other logical reason than to believe that Trump did this, because there was this moment, and I remember at the moment, Ben, you were sitting next to me, you said, well, there it is. The question was to Cohen, would you have made that payment to Stormy Daniels without getting a sign off from Mr. Trump? No. Why? Because everything required a sign off from Mr. Trump. But on top of that, I wanted the money back. And if there's anything we've learned about Cohen, it's that he's self-interested, and it was a lot of money. It was $130,000. So of course he wanted that money back. So just to build out those 2 points there.
Yeah, there was some, judging from your tweets and Anna's tweets threads, there was a lot of atmospherics too that seemed, might not have been directly on point as far as the charges, but he talked about his role of bullying people and bilking contractors, and that this was sort of his job, and for Trump, and planting scummy stories, the scummy stories about Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Well, he wasn't planting them, but that was part of the scheme. And he also said something like, he talked about why Trump doesn't use email, and he said he knows too many people who have gone down as a result of having emails prosecutors can use. What's the impact of this sort of these atmospherics of his role? Maybe Ben?
So I don't think we know. Look, it is impossible to watch this. And look, maybe I'm revealing my biases here. It's impossible to watch this without learning about the depth of scumminess and sleaziness that, Donald Trump is engaged in. Not that that's a terrible surprise, but and I do think you could imagine a bunch of jurors having a very strong ick factor. I also think it's possible to imagine a bunch of jurors feeling sort of overwhelmed by it and, saying, okay, they're throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall here, and the spaghetti is all icky and disgusting and slimy and moldy, but the specific charge is about record falsification, and I'm going to ignore everything else. And I don't think they've proven that, although they got a lot closer to proving that today. So I've just learned over the years, don't ever interpolate your own reactions to the jury, which I think journalists really tend to do. And I'm going to resist doing it. These are 18 people who are not me, who are watching the same show as I am, and they're really entitled to their own reactions to it.
So, but I have a question though on, we did get Trump's direct involvement in the actual payoff to Stormy Daniels. We did seemingly get his, the causation element of it all with the falsification of business records, but where are we getting that the falsification was done with an intent to commit or conceal another crime? Because it feels like that is where, maybe it's just that there's so much circumstantial evidence that has already been put into the record that we're just not going to get anything but that. But I mean,
Well, sorry.
No, go ahead. That's it. Just
yeah. I mean, I guess
that element.
Well, I mean, I think it's worth dwelling on the meeting between Weiselberg, Cohen, and Trump right after Cohen had his temper tantrum. And I will say that this was probably the only moment in Cohen's testimony that he got visibly emotional. I think that this betrayal, as we all know, still lingers with him about the bonus, after all he did, etc. But Hoffinger made a point to ask Cohen if, during that meeting, Weiselberg had the bank statement with the handwritten notes in hand in which he grossed up the 180 to 360 in front of Trump, at Trump's direction. That this goes to the tax fraud object offense. Again, it's not the primary one that we've been talking about of the New York election law, but it is one of the three. And I was speaking with Ben on the way back from the courthouse, asking his thoughts on why they're not making that more prominent in the case, because to me it seems more cut and dry. I think, Ben, if you wanted to give your reasoning as to why I thought it was pretty compelling, but to me that was one of the clearest elements of the object offense intent that we got today.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty compelling too. I think the reason the prosecution will tend to rely on it less is that most people's sense of tax fraud doesn't intuitively include paying too much taxes. And that there's something, it lends itself well to a defense harmless error, who was hurt, he paid more taxes than he was owed, than he had to. Excuse me. And so I think they may shy away from it for that reason. But look, I mean, one possibility is that they're going to try to argue the New York State tax law, campaign finance law, just on the basis of all of these statements that this payment was intended to influence the election, right? And they kind of don't feel like they need an evidentiary or an expert witness. They can just do it all in closing arguments. But I don't know. I think, Anna, you raise a good point, and it's not clear to me whether they're just sort of skating over this element a little bit to their ultimate detriment.
Yeah, because this is the issue, is even if they argue in closing or through an expert witness that these were illegal in-kind campaign contributions, that still doesn't get to the core issue of whether these records were falsified with the intent to cover those illegal in-kind campaign contributions up. So I don't know what we heard today. And again, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. Maybe the idea is just, of course, like there's only one conclusion, which is that they want to cover this up. And maybe, but I just don't know that I feel if looking at this case as it stands right now, do I feel confident that 12 jurors would come back with that conclusion? Not really.
No, I agree with that. I think it would be very good for them to lock that down somehow, either by asking Cohen directly, why did they organize it this way? You know, what do you understand about what Weiselberg and Trump were intending when they ordered this for your benefit? I think having them sort of lock that down would be helpful.
Well, and didn't they ask something to that effect? And he said, I don't know, really. I would just wanted to get paid.
We sort of ended there, where in the meeting, directly prior to the meeting, Cohen had requested to get paid in the lump sum of the $420,000, and then in the meeting with Trump and Weiselberg had said, we're going to pay you over 12 months over the year, and Cohen was like, no, I'd rather get paid in a lump sum, and Weiselberg said, no, we're going to pay you in 12 installments over the year, and then Hoffinger asked, was this at all intended to be for future legal services as, in your new role as personal attorney to the president? No, it was meant for reimbursements. So maybe we're going to get there at the beginning of tomorrow.
And it was really clear that he didn't do any legal work and that there was no retainer.
It was consulting.
That aspect of it, there's only one person who can contradict him on that, and that's Donald Trump, and he's not going to take the stand.
The other thing I thought they were pretty clear on is, you mentioned before, they were talking about how they tried to, they wanted to delay paying Stormy Daniels. They said, push it out as long as you can. Trump, if I win, Trump said, then it no longer has relevance. If I lose, then I don't really care. Well, that's sort of, you eliminate any notion that this had something to do with protecting Melania. It was all about the campaign. So that part seems strong, but I agree. It'd be nice to have an expert talk about the finance crime.
But all of this really does depend on how he holds up under cross tomorrow.
Okay. Do we still have you guys? Because we've lost your camera.
We are, I believe, audio-wise, we're still good.
Okay. All right. So we'll go forward with, we'll be thankful for what we have. And then, Anna, did you have another problem with some of the proof that came in today, particularly whether the evidence was strong enough that, Trump was the driving factor rather than Weiselberg, or did I misunderstand?
Well, no, I think that's another thing that I would point to, that the defense potentially has a lot of lines of inquiry on cross, and then also just in closing. And again, we don't know what else is going to come out tomorrow on direct or what's going to happen on cross. But I think that, and Ben and Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, because we don't have access to a transcript yet. We are just going based on what we can recall about what we heard today. But it seems a little bit more to me that it was like Weiselberg who came up with the way to do it all. And then they went into Trump's office and, Weiselberg showed him the plan, and maybe Trump had knowledge of the plan. It does seem that it was said he approved it, so that but there's enough wiggle room there, I think, for the defense to be able to say, you heard that it was Weiselberg who came
up with it, but nothing.
Well, I think you've frozen. We're almost out of time anyway. It's a cliffhanger.
Sorry, are we?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
I'm not sure how we got muted, but no, I think the answer is Weiselberg can think anything he wants, but nothing in that organization happens until Trump approves it. And so the thing that caused it to happen was Trump's approval, at least if you believe the prosecution's theory and Michael Cohen.
Right. And I'm not doubting I that is my read of it too, but I'm saying that I think that there's enough there for the defense to potentially work with a kind of, this was all Weiselberg's plan. Trump was too busy to figure out what was going on. He was just sitting in his office doing all this other stuff because he was the president-elect at the time. And he had all this other stuff going on. That's been their argument. And then Weiselberg came in, said, here's this plan, and waved it around. And then Trump said, oh, whatever, you figure it out. That's kind of going to be the argument, right?
Yeah, and Cohen and other witnesses have all said that Weiselberg controls or oversees every penny that comes in and out of the Trump organization.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll watch tomorrow to see if Cohen implodes or how badly he implodes. Did you want to say something else, Anna?
No, I was just going to say Ben Wittes's golden rule: never judge a witness until they've been subject to cross-examination. So
which I have violated twice in the last 2 weeks and paid for both times.
Okay. Well, we will leave it there. Anna Bauer, Tyler McBrien, and Benjamin Wittes, thank you for joining us today. Thank you all for watching. If you want to support Lawfare's coverage of the Trump trials and watch this dispatch without ads, please become a Lawfare material supporter at lawfaremedia.org/support.